Hello, my name is Mark Carrolls, and this is my presentation for the Environmental Science Spring of 2019 End of Course research paper. I did my research paper on General Motors as they push towards an all-electric lineup by the year 2023. General Motors aims to launch an all-electric line of automobiles in an effort to remove fossil fuel emissions that produce greenhouse gases. Globally, 15% of man-made carbon dioxides come from cars, trucks, airplanes, ships, and other vehicles that we use around the world, which is might seem like a small amount, but if we could remove those emissions from the environment, it would go a long way to changing some of the current global warming and greenhouse effect issues that we're experiencing today. So we're going to push towards an all-electric lineup, and why we're going to do that is mostly for environmental causes and lack of fossil fuels in the near future. I'm going to discuss the difference between the hydrogen fuel cell and the battery option between the electric vehicles. We're going to go through a cost breakdown and kind of see exactly how much it's going to cost GM and how much it's going to cost the rest of the world to kind of adapt this all-electric lineup. What it has as an environmental impact, both locally and globally, and the timeline in which we can hope for to see changes for these new vehicle implementations from General Motors. So why do we even want to pursue an all-electric line of automobiles if we currently have cars and they're working just fine? Well, there's a huge problem with the fossil fuels in automobiles. The amount of emissions released on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, decade basis has caused ozone issues and greenhouse gas effect. The greenhouse gas effect, what the emissions are emitting into the environment, are high amounts of carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, which are found naturally in our atmosphere in small amounts, but we're emitting too much that's causing the issue with the ozone layer. And because they're emitting those type of gases, it's affecting global warming, which is causing the melting of the polar ice caps, which is causing sea levels to rise and floods to occur. Um, One of the big reasons is General Motors, while Ford, Nissan, and a few other companies were really pushing hybrid vehicles, General Motors was really pushing their Hummer, which was a gas guzzler, and they weren't really seen as an environmentally conscious company, which kind of really hurt their stock. And it was one of the reasons why they were on the decline while a lot of other companies were on the incline, which is one of the big reasons why they had released the Volt. And they're looking to, well, they currently have just this year released the Bolt EV, which is their extended range electric vehicle. They closed last year. They closed 5 plants in an effort to save some money in order to make this push towards an all-electric lineup. They are also planning to close 3 more plants this year. And while it seems like a big issue to close these plants, obviously there's a lot of layoffs. They are trying to distribute the funds accordingly, and put the effort and the money where it needs to be in order to move towards a future fossil fuel free and combustion engine free. There's only a small amount of consumers out there that really want to purchase these products currently, mostly because the style, availability, and the ability to travel long ranges. And due to the demand of current vehicles like the Tesla, and some of the other BMW vehicles similar to that, the electric vehicle sales are expected to more than double over the next 2 years. So right now so batteries are fuel cells. Right now you have a direct charge battery makeup where you have a large battery cell that's charged, that can produce propulsion to the automobile for an extended period of time. Some of the early models got up to like 30 to 35 miles before it needed to be charged. So they were hybrids. They were electric hybrids with gas options, so you can drive short distances on the electric, charge it in, and then only revert to the gas if you need to. These new extended electrical vehicles can travel well over 200 miles before needing a charge. So the hydrogen fuel cell is another option to the battery. The hydrogen fuel cell provides more power. You can fill it like gasoline, where it separates the hydrogen atoms from the water molecules and allows that to be used within the engine to charge the battery capacity that allows it to essentially like an alternator stay charged the whole time as you're traveling for longer distances, and then you could stop by something similar like a gas pump to fill your tank up, and you wouldn't have to wait for the vehicle to charge because it'd be self-charging. So that provides more power. It could travel longer distances, and the fuel cells are referred to as refillable batteries, which they rely on devices called stacks to combine hydrogen and oxygen from the air to produce water vapor and electrical current, which allows that battery to charge. With the current models, you have quick response times, so you step on the gas and it happens. You're not waiting for a combustible engine. It does have longer charge times, but currently the way everything's set up and what you would have to do to get the hydrogen cells implemented, the most cost-effective way is the battery direct charge. Some pros and cons of moving towards an all-electric lineup. You're obviously going to reduce greenhouse gas production, which is going to help on the environment. Budget savings for the user. If you're only paying a little more in an electric bill over paying several $100s a week sometimes in gas, depending on travel and distance you go for work, you won't need to actually pay for all this gas. You'll be able to charge it at home or at a local charging stations. And there's less repair needed for a battery powered car than you would a combustible engine. You have less moving parts. You have less things that you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about oil. You don't have to worry about gas or fuel filters, oil filters, anything like that, because everything's within the battery. Some drawbacks for this is the design options are limited currently. Most companies are running with just one design. That's why GM's pushing all their chips in order to try to get multiple designs going over the next 5 years. The fill-up and charging station availability is very limited right now, and you have to really look out for them, otherwise you can miss them, and if you miss them, you can't just fill your tank. You kind of have to push your car or get a portable battery pack in order to charge your car in order to get it to the nearest charging station. You don't really have any hydrogen fuel options right now, even though General Motors is one of the companies pushing towards getting several stations in large major cities implemented currently. But it is very cost needy, and that's why they needed all this extra money from closing the plants in order to kind of facilitate this move towards the future they're looking for. Also, the technology is still not perfect. Recently in China, you had a Tesla blow up just kind of sitting in a parking lot, and there's several of these that during an accident, because of the way the fuel cells are designed, are combustible and they explode with when they're damaged. So the cost for the launch and the expected profit. So we kind of discussed a little bit why it's going to cost so much in order to implement these electric vehicles, because we're moving away from fossil fuel and it's not cheap. GM's expected to initially lose money on the launch. They have to essentially take the approach of, to make money, you first have to lose money or spend money. So they're taking an all-in approach on that, and there's a lot of cost beyond just the production and implementation of these lines, and the slowly removing the combustible engine lines from repair. As far even beyond just the fuel costs, you also have trying to train new technicians in order to repair them, train small shops, and parts availability. I mean, there's a lot of cost that goes into just completely changing what you've done for about 100 years now. So they see a need and they feel a need. So they're seeing that over the next several centuries, I know it's not right away, but over the next several centuries, you're going to see the depletion of fossil fuels, and the demand for electrical cars is not quite there yet, but they want to be a pioneer towards this, A, to help save the environment, and B, because they want to get ahead of it, and they don't want to be catching or trailing behind. Right now, the majority of electric vehicles or EV, long distance EV, are considered luxury brand vehicles. So with that being said, GM's going to launch their Cadillac line to really kind of implement what they see as the new line of electric vehicles, because Cadillac is GM's so-called luxury line of vehicles. So the environmental impacts we have, the global emissions right now, 95% of the world's energy comes from petroleum-based fuels. Since 1970, global carbon dioxide has increased by 90%, and China and the US have the highest global emissions rates over anybody else in the entire world. So if they can adjust those global emissions rates between the two countries, they can have a huge impact on what the current issues are with the environment and the global emissions. Cause of climate change, humans have been increasing carbon dioxide by more than a third from its initial reports when they started reporting this back in the early 50s. Nitrogen dioxide emissions from fossil fuels are causing an issue within the stratosphere, causing the ozone layer issues, and actually creating more of an open space, which is causing UV to penetrate, which is warming up from global warming, and it's causing some of the polar ice caps to melt. So the climate change is causing those polar ice caps to melt, which is causing the sea level to rise, which is causing flooding, and it's causing weird things to happen with the storms, hurricanes, earthquakes, everything you can kind of name. They changing the culture of the environment is altering the way some of this is occurring at a more often rate. Almost 95% of the world's transportation energy comes from petroleum-based fuels, largely gasoline and diesel, and a stronger greenhouse effect will warm the oceans and partly melt glaciers and other ice, increasing sea levels. Ocean water will also expand if it warms, contributing to further level of sea rise. The timeline and expectations, GM ceased production on hybrids Volts, so they're aiming towards their long-range EV. The Bolt EV currently gets 200 miles plus to the charge, and it's got a hatchback designed to kind of facilitate the demand for the SUV type vehicles. Beyond Bolt, they're expected to have over 20 different models by 2023. They currently have 2 models in production they're looking to release in 2020, and they're expecting to double electric vehicles sales in 2019. So in conclusion, we do have General Motors aiming to launch an all-electric lineup of automobiles in an effort to remove fossil fuel emissions that produce greenhouse gases. Their main push, with all said and done, is the environmental constrict on what fossil fuels are currently doing to the environment, how environmental friendly everybody is moving towards, how they have the technology to move away from the combustible engine, and how it's going to take a major company like General Motors, which is one of the top 3 companies in the world currently, to move towards an all-electric lineup, to move away from fossil fuels in order to get everybody else on board. So they're pursuing it because it's the right thing to do and it's going to help their company. They have several options that they're perfecting the technology in the hydrogen fuel cell and the battery operated. They know what the cost is going to be, and they're making moves to alter those costs, offset those costs. They know what the environmental impact is currently and what they're hoping to do, and they have a good, aggressive timeline. So all in all, I think General Motors is making a great stride towards making a change for the future, making a change for their environment, and hopefully making a change for all other companies and everybody else moving forward, understanding that we have other options outside of fossil fuels. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know if you have any questions.